is sourdough bread day. We thought we would start with a starter today. I will make sourdough bread. The event that we're having when we have the recipe thing, I'm going to use sourdough bread for the banana recipe. We're tying that into one of Julie's classes. Julie's going to help y'all plant some basil. So I'm going to make a bruschetta, a tomato and basil bruschetta, and I will be using the sourdough bread for that. So I will walk y'all through the process of making sourdough bread. I will say this, everybody has a different way that they make sourdough bread. I don't think any two people make sourdough bread the same. There are some people who absolutely stick to strict measurements. They measure everything. They keep the temperature of their starter. They keep a journal on when they have their starter. They keep a calendar. I don't do that. Okay, I don't do that. I don't keep the temperatures. I keep my starter when I start it, and I don't do a lot at one time. And there's been, and sometimes I will go a day or so and forget to feed my starter, so I can skip a day. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes my bread rises and is nice and pretty, sometimes it doesn't. I think there are things that you absolutely have to be careful with. First of all, when you make your starter, whether you're going to keep it on your counter or you're going to put it in your refrigerator, you want your starter to be active, which means you want it to bubble, you want it to grow, and you want it to smell sour. Okay, it's got to have that smell, it's got to bubble, because it is fermenting. That's what this is, it's fermenting. And whether you keep it on the counter or in the refrigerator, you do not want it to get mold on it. You do not want to have mold on it. You do not want anything in it, black specks, bugs, so you want to keep it in a container. What I have for y'all today is just a regular mason jar. Your recipe says it calls for half a gallon, but I don't think you'll need that much, because unless you're going to be making bread every day on in, you don't really need a half a gallon jar of starter. So we're just going to use a regular quart. That's what I use at home. I have a little quart size jar that has a locking lid on it, and that's what I use. So we're going to use a quart size. Also, the measurements are a little different. Some people have you start with like 2 or 3 cups of flour and then 2 or 3 cups of water. We're going to do 1 cup of flour today, 1 cup of water today, and when I feed mine from then on, I just feed because I don't make bread every day. I don't make, so unless you're going to be doing this all the time and keeping this card in your refrigerator, which we'll go over what this card is in a little bit, unless you're going to be keeping that to use, which means you're going to be baking almost every day on in, you don't need that much. So I only use 1/4 of a cup when I feed mine. I only feed mine 1/4 of a cup of flour and 1/4 of a cup of water. Now, I don't use distilled water. Some people will say you have to use distilled water, and they may have good luck with using distilled water, but don't forget, this is a fermenting process. So what I have for you today is regular spring water, because you do not want to use water that has chlorine in it. So if you have town water, don't use it, because that has chlorine in it. So what I have for you, and that's what we have, is town water. So what I have today is spring water. I use my well water at home. Okay? Some people may have a fit about that, but we've had our well water tested. It's good, it's clean. So that's what we use, is I use my well water at home. We have good water, clean water. And plus, don't forget, what you're doing this for the sourdough for, it is for the minerals and honestly the bacteria that builds up in this fermenting process, and you don't want anything to interfere with that. You don't want anything to interfere with that process, and using chlorine treated water will interfere in that process. So, has anybody ever had sourdough bread? Everybody? Most everybody? If you haven't, it is a different bread. It doesn't taste sour. Some people automatically think, well, it tastes sour. It doesn't taste sour. It has a little bit of a different texture, and depending on how you bake it, what you bake it in, you can look online. There are all kinds of recipes out there. You can explore with this all you want to. You can use whatever you want to. What we're using today, and I will tell you, some people will say it doesn't matter, but I have better success using unbleached flour. I've had other people tell me, oh, well, I just use the self-rising flour I have at home. And they may have, but I use unbleached flour. Doesn't matter what kind. Today we're using King Arthur because that's what Food Life has. At home, I think what I have is an unbleached, and it's either, it might be the Southern Biscuit formula, but it's an unbleached. So I do make sure to use unbleached. When I use my starter and when I make my bread, I do. It just seems to work better. Some people do very well with self-rising or bleached flour, but I just never have much luck with it. I'm not telling anybody that if they use it, they're wrong, because if it works for them, it works for them. All right. So I gave you a recipe, and like I said, it does tell you to start with like a 1 gallon glass jar container. I'm going to give you a quart jar if you want to make it today. The flour of your choice. I do just prefer unbleached flour. And of course it says filtered water. You can use spring water. And like I said, I use my well water. And if you have well water and it's been tested and it's good, it will be fine. And a wooden spoon. Do not use anything metal. Do not use, now we will use the ring and tips on the jar, but you can also get like a cloth and a rubber band and just cover it with a cloth and a rubber band, because all you're wanting to do is keep bugs and stuff. You don't want the gnats to get to it or anything like that. So all you're really doing is you're just keeping stuff out of it. So you can just use a rubber band and a cloth or a cheesecloth. And but you do not want to use metal. You do not want to use a metal bowl. The only time that you're going to use anything metal, because I use a cast iron Dutch oven. That's what I bake. That's what I bake my bread in, is a cast iron Dutch oven. Other people have bread pans. They have bread baskets where you can put it in this basket and it will rise in that basket. They have silicone pans that you can bake in. They have glass pans that you can bake in. And when you, anything that you, any kind of bread that you can make, you can use sourdough for. You can start with your starter. When you make your sourdough bread, you want that starter to be active. An active starter takes at least 2 to 3 days, especially if you keep it out. You can put it in the refrigerator, but it takes about 2 weeks for it to get to the point where you can make a bread. So an active starter is bubbly, it smells sour because it is fermenting, and what you do is as you feed your starter in this jar, as it gets to be too much in this jar and you don't have enough room keeping your active starter, you can take another jar and you can take a cup out of that, because you usually just use a cup to start making your loaf of bread. And you can add it to another jar, and you can put this in the refrigerator. Now it will stop fermenting once it goes into the refrigerator, unless you keep it in there, like I said, 2 weeks to a month. That process will slow down, but you can keep it in this, and there are tons of discard recipes. It's called discard recipes. So if you've decided that you're not going to make bread this week, and your jar is full and you don't have room to fill it, you can take a cup out, you can put it in here, you can put it in your refrigerator, and if you want to make cinnamon rolls with this discard, you can. You can make cinnamon rolls, you can make hamburger buns, you can make pizza crust. They are all kinds of recipes out there for sourdough. So the question is, why would you go to all this trouble to make sourdough bread when you can just go to the grocery store and buy you a loaf of bread? Does anybody know the difference? It's not the same. Well, you're right, it's not the same because one of the main things about sourdough bread, and as you know, we have been talking about the blue zones and healthy eating. Well, the one and only bread that they ever talk about is sourdough bread. Because when you are creating that starter and you're creating that fermenting process, that automatically makes it better for you. It is creating in that starter a bacteria. It's called a wild yeast. That active starter is actually creating what is called a wild yeast. And it's also creating a bacteria if you have a gluten intolerance. Now, sourdough bread, you are using flour. Flour has gluten in it. Doesn't matter whether it's organic flour, doesn't matter if it's whole wheat flour, doesn't matter if it has rye in it. As long as it has gluten in it and you have celiac or you have a very bad gluten intolerance, then yes, you will not, anything that has flour, you will not be able to eat it. Just because it's sourdough bread does not make that gluten automatically go away. However, it does start the process of breaking that gluten down. So if you do have a little bit of a problem, but you like bread and you want a healthy piece of bread, then the sourdough process starts to break that gluten down. It makes it easier for you to digest. That's first of all. Also, it also creates a process, that process where your glycemic index, that's your sugar levels, it also creates a process where those sugar levels don't rise so high and rise so fast, and you can maintain your glycemic index levels a little bit better with that. So, it is healthy. Not only are you doing it at home, but just remember, just because if you go to the store and you buy sourdough bread, that process is still commercialized. So even though it may not have gone through all these steps that you're going to go through at home with your sourdough bread. Now, another thing that I do sometimes, especially when it's cold weather out, is I will use yeast. You don't have to use yeast, but I will use yeast, especially when it's cold. You know, there's only certain times that your dough will rise and rise well, and there's times that you can tell by the weather that it's not going to. And when it's not going to, I do use yeast. I only use a packet, so it does. Sometimes mine does have yeast in it. It just depends on what kind of weather it is. So, does anybody have any questions? Any questions at all? No?
That's unbleached flour.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Unbleached flour.
Yes, I do use unbleached flour. Because again, you don't want anything to interfere in that fermenting process. And that is the most important part. That fermenting process is what helps make this bread just a little bit more healthier, a little bit easier to digest. And it does give it that unique taste and flavor that most people look for. So nobody has any questions? Who all wants a sourdough starter? You want one? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Okay. All right. I'm going to walk you through the process of making one, and then I will make everybody else's and give them to you before you leave today. Okay. So now I'm going to have to yell. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 1 cup of water.
Raise your hand.
We'll sit in the back.
Now, like I said, remember, you want this to ferment. So you can, I keep mine on the kitchen counter. As long as it's a little cool out. Now, if it gets really hot in the house and I may stick it in the refrigerator because I don't like, you don't want mold on it. You don't want it to get anything like that in it. And like I said, I will walk you through the process of making the bread on our next little chat. I'm just going to add this to it, and I'm going to make a mess. Okay. And I'm just going to stir that up. Just like that. And like I said, you can use a cloth and a rubber band. You don't want this jar to seal, so we're not going to seal it. But we're just going to put this on there lightly. And because mine has a lock on it at home, sometimes to make sure it's good and mixed up good, I just do that. I just take it, shake it, just like that. And you can see it's kind of liquidy. Some people like for their starter to be more liquid, and some like it for it to be stiffer. Again, that's up to you. Like I said, as many people out there that make sourdough bread, I guarantee you 99% of them make it completely different from the next person next to it. So do what works for you. If this is what you want to do, you want to make bread, and then I just loosen this up, make sure that's not hot, and then I just set it on the counter. Now, when I do it on the and tomorrow, what you should do sometimes is this will be growing. You'll see it come up the jar. And when you take that lid off, probably in like 2 or 3 days, when you take that lid off, you want to be able to smell it. If you can't smell it, it's not fermented, okay? So you do want to smell it. You want to check it. You want to look at it. And then tomorrow, and it tells you on your paper that you have, it says half a cup, but I only do a fourth a cup because I don't make bread all the time. So I'll add a fourth a cup of flour and a fourth a cup of water. The next day after that, then probably by the time the weekend gets here, then I will have enough starter to make a loaf of bread. Probably I will have enough starter to make 2. And if I don't want to make bread and this jar's getting full, like I said, you just pour a cup out of here, put it in another jar, put it in the refrigerator. It's already fermented. It's went through that whole process, but you can keep it in that refrigerator for up to 2 weeks. And like I said, you can make anything you want to. You can make cinnamon rolls, pancakes. I actually used my cup of starter the other night to make pancakes. So everybody had sourdough. And I just took a regular pancake mix because I used the protein pancake mix. And I just took that and added my starter to it, let it sit for about an hour, and made my pancakes that way. So you can do just about anything with this that you want to. Now, does anybody have any questions?
I do.
Yes.
Once you start using it, you still add to it?
Yes.
To keep it going?
Yes. If you take a cup out and you make your bread, then you go right ahead behind yourself, and I will add a fourth of a cup, and then I can keep just adding to it till my jar gets too full, and then I will take part of that out and put in my discard jar and keep that for other things. But you want, when you make the bread, you want this to be active.
How often?
How often?
With a fourth of a cup.
With a fourth of a cup. If you do it with a fourth of a cup, it will probably take you, today is Monday, you will have enough by Friday to make a loaf of bread, plus you will still have some left. Because we added, you've got 2 cups in here now. So for 4 days by the weekend, which is usually if I'm going to make bread is when I do it, I will have 2 to 3 cups of starter in here. And that gives me enough. Unless I'm going to make a lot of bread, I don't add a lot to it. I don't feed it a lot.
So you don't have to cover
No, you're going to add to it tomorrow. First thing tomorrow, you're going to add that fourth of a cup of flour, the fourth cup of water, and you're gonna do the same thing on Wednesday, and the same thing on Thursday, and the same thing on Friday. And so that by Saturday, if you're gonna make bread, you have enough in here, you have plenty left over to keep building on, but plus you also have enough to take that out and keep making, and make the bread.
So what you're saying, you're gonna add to it for a week?
Yes.
About a week?
Yes.
Before you start using it?
Yes, and once you start using it, then you're gonna add a fourth of a cup of water and flour when you take that cup out. And then by Monday or Monday or Wednesday, if it looks like you have more, you don't have room to add it, then you'll take a cup out and that'll be your discard. Some people throw it away. Some people won't use the discard. Other people, like I said, they keep it in the refrigerator and they use it for different stuff. I use mine to make pancakes with. And then
How long can you save it in the refrigerator? Like you said, if you don't make bread, maybe
Up to 2
every
weeks.
once a month or something like that.
up to 2 weeks. And what I do, and I've done it before, when I'm really got time on my hands, like I do, and never, but you can take that discard and put it in the refrigerator, and you can just keep you a jar of discard in there. And as long as you're using it and you're adding to it, then that's good. And you keep it in the refrigerator, you don't leave it out overnight or anything. And you can do that the same way. You can take out what you want and use it, and then just add your other discard to it. And you can just continue that process with your discard. Okay. But I will walk y'all through the bread, making the bread next time, and I'll show you what I do. And some people may come up and tell you that is not how I do it. Like I may use yeast. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It depends on the weather. I don't try to knead mine a lot. Some people say, oh no, you have to knead it. You have to knead it. I don't. I do it just enough to get where I think I need it to be, and I put it, and I put mine in a, some people will want it, they like to make it, and they make theirs pretty stiff when they do, but they can take that and they can mold that bread into this round shape, and then they can put it in a flat pan and they can let it bake in the oven, or they can put it in a loaf pan and make a loaf of bread. I just throw mine in my Dutch oven, put the lid on it. It comes out a pretty good size loaf of bread, but that's pretty. I don't play with mine and mess with mine, but other people do. And you know, they'll say, oh, you have to keep the temperature. It has to be maintained at this temperature, and you have to do it. I don't have time to do all that. So, like I said, sometimes I have good luck with my bread, and sometimes I don't. But you can make this as scientifically accurate as you want to, or as everybody will tell you, I'm pretty good at winging it. So sometimes I just wing it. Yes.
When you're baking it, because you're not supposed to use a metal spoon when you're mixing it, but if you're baking it, can you use metal loaf pans for it at that point?
Yes, because at that time, the reason you don't want to use metal is the metal will interfere with that fermenting process. That metal will interfere with that fermenting process, and you don't want anything to interfere with that process. And metal will do that. So yeah, by the time you get it in the pans, you're baking it, and you're going to stop the fermenting process.
Well, on here it says something about plastic. Not to use plastic, but I saw that you use a plastic stirrer.
Well, again, some people won't use. I use a plastic or silicone stirrer at home. I use this one, but now. And some people put their starter in a plastic container with a lid. I know people who do that. So there again, plastic is one of those things. I either use a wooden spoon or a silicone spoon at home. That's what I have. But and I use my glass bowl to rise it in. Now I don't think it would work as good if you put it in a plastic bowl to rise it. I think a plastic bowl would kind of interfere with that, because a glass bowl, you can kind of keep it warm, and you can even kind of, if you think it's not rising good, some people may set it down in warm water so that it will rise good. And plastic will not conduct that heat as well as a glass bowl. Anything else? All right, I will make sure that I get a starter for everybody who wants one, and you have the recipe here. And when is the bruschetta class, Julie?
The 12th, I think.
The 12th. So if you'll be here on the 12th, I will make sure to have some sourdough bread made for you to try, and that's what I'll have with bruschetta. Okay, thank you.